I'd now like to talk a bit about inhalation and how we get air into the body. Once our students have a basic idea of how they're supposed to stand, and that's starting to go in the right direction, they need to figure out how to get air into the body in such a way that it sets them up for success, regardless of what they're singing. Now, my personal opinion is that every person is going to breathe a little bit differently. Are there general shapes? I think that there are. And I think that those shapes are slightly different for different styles. The way that we're going to breathe for the classical bel canto tradition, classically, is going to be a little bit different than what we might need if we were doing musical theater mixed belting, for instance. However, the general shape is more or less the same, but the specifics are going to differ from person to person. And if I impose the sensations I have in my body on my students, then it's never going to be a holistic and natural approach for them. So when I begin teaching inhalation with my students, the first thing I always do is explain the basic anatomy. We have a diaphragm. The diaphragm sits rather high in the body. It's not in your belly. It's relatively high. And it flattens. And as it flattens, it pulls the lungs down. And then we have muscles called the external intercostals between the ribs that pull the rib cage up and out. And this way we get more of a basically 360-degree expansion of the lungs, down from the diaphragm and then out to the sides and in the front and the back from the external intercostals and rib cage. Once we go over all that, I don't necessarily prescribe that they breathe in a particular way. I ask them to take their thumbs and I say any place between your rib cage and your pelvis all the way around is fair game. You can take your thumbs and I want you to put them in a spot on your rib cage or in that position. And I want you to take a slow and quiet breath. That's very important. That is a slow and quiet breath. And just to see if you can allow the breath to fall into the position of your thumbs. Now, I say the thumbs as opposed to the hands because the hands are very big and the thumb is very small and specific. And it gets them to isolate and specify a little bit more. So right now I have my thumbs right under my bottom ribs. And I'm just going to take an easy breath in, seeing if I can allow that area to expand. Great. And then I'll say, all right, move them to a different spot. Maybe now it's down near your belly button. Can I move the space down near my belly button? Now, what about in the back? Can I get the back to move? I can, that's harder, right? And then I'll say, well, you have levels. You can do high and you can do low. Your left hand can be high, your right hand can be low. And so I'll have them move their hands at their own, wherever they want to. And they can explore all the way around their lower abdominal area to see where they can and cannot get breath. And this is interesting because then they start to realize that they have a bit more volitional control over how breath gets into their body. And this is an important thing because, again, I want them to figure out how they breathe, where they can focus. Obviously, the feel of the thumbs, right? We need to draw their attention to something so they can get information, and just feeling the thumbs expanding outward when they breathe typically gets the breath low in the body and not heaving, gasping breaths up in the clavicles. They can look in a mirror, right? Most people have a mirror. If they don't, they're probably having a Zoom lesson with you, which means they can just make their picture big. And if they make their picture big, suddenly they have a reflective screen. I've had students in practice rooms who are on their phones and can't quite do that. They'll use the reflection from the door, if it's a glass door. Or they can turn the video record on their phone and then just hit the flip button, and then now they have another mirror. But looking and seeing actually what's moving. The first thing we need to do to fix a habit is understand what the habit is to begin with. And oftentimes just seeing that they're going every time they breathe helps them to correct that. We can also ask them to focus on that quiet breath. And the reason for that is whenever we make a noise when we breathe, something in the back is constricting. And that's generally not what we're looking for in singing. I also want to encourage my students to have a slow breath. Oftentimes I find that my students are so concerned with how they sound that they forget that there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen before they even begin to sing. Getting them to slow that process down helps them to take in the information that their body needs to learn these patterns.